They told you the Indiana Fever went nuclear. That after one playoff loss, the front office snapped, slashing their roster in half and sending 8 players packing overnight. Social media blew up, headlines screamed Fever Purge, and within hours, the narrative was sealed. Chaos in Indiana, panic in the front office, and a franchise imploding from the inside out. But here's the problem. None of that actually happened. What if I told you the so-called 8-player purge wasn't just exaggerated? It was completely fabricated. What if the truth wasn't about a team cutting players, but a team barely surviving one of the worst injury crises in modern WNBA history? This wasn't a calculated front office move. It was a desperate attempt to keep the lights on while their roster fell apart piece by piece. Yet that side of the story never went viral, because chaos sells and the truth, it rarely trends. This is the story the media won't tell you. A story of misdirection, of a narrative carefully constructed to hide something far more inconvenient. And before we get into the receipts, I want you to remember one thing. In sports, what you're told is rarely the whole picture. So if you're here for headlines, this isn't the video for you. But if you're here for truth, the kind that changes how you see the game, then hit that like button. Because what's coming next isn't rumor, it's revelation. The so-called Fever Purge, it was never a purge at all. It was the cover-up for something much, much bigger. The Fever Purge story didn't just appear, it erupted. Within hours of Indiana's playoff exit, dozens of YouTube channels, Twitter threads, and TikToks all started saying the same thing. The Fever just cut 8 players in one night. It was dramatic, it was outrageous, and it was exactly the kind of chaos that keeps fans glued to their screens. Video titles screamed words like roster massacre, Clark's team collapses overnight, and Indiana implodes. The thumbnail showed Caitlin Clark with her head down, players walking off the court, and the words 8 gone plastered in red. It was perfect clickbait, too perfect. And the list they gave sounded credible enough to fool anyone not paying attention. Names like Natasha Howard, Sydney Colson, Ariel Powers, Brianna Turner, Lexi Huh, all familiar players, all supposedly cut in one brutal night. Some channels even threw in extra names just to make it sound worse, padding the list until they reached that magic number 8. That number was the hook. It gave their story structure, shock value, and just enough official-sounding weight to make people stop scrolling and start watching. But there was one massive problem. The number wasn't real. The internet ran wild with it anyway. Fans were tagging players, asking what happened. Comment sections filled with speculation about front office chaos and locker room drama. People were saying the Fever had imploded, that Caitlin Clark's rookie magic had faded, that the franchise was already tearing itself apart. In less than 24 hours, one rumor had become accepted fact. That's the power of a viral lie. It doesn't need proof, just repetition. Once enough voices echo the same claim, it starts to feel true. But as narrative analysts, that's exactly where we stop and look closer. Because the louder a story gets, the more likely it's hiding something. So we started digging through official WNBA records, transaction logs, and every credible report we could find. And what we discovered next didn't just debunk the Purge narrative. It exposed how completely fabricated it really was. When the noise gets loud, the truth hides in the quiet places. The fine print, the official logs, the forgotten pages nobody bothers to read. That's where we went. If 8 players were truly cut in one night, the proof would be there. WNBA transaction records, team announcements, press releases. So we dug into every corner of the league's official database. And what do we find? Nothing. Not a single roster move, not one verified cut, not even a hint of the so-called purge. The Fever's last documented transaction was weeks earlier, September 4th, when they extended Shea Petty's contract for the remainder of the season. That's it. No mass firings, no roster overhaul, just silence. The more we checked, the stranger it got. Every claim in the viral videos collapsed under the simplest scrutiny. Take Lexi Hall, for example. Multiple creators confidently listed her as released. Dramatic music, sad montages, the works. But according to the Fever's own front office and public records, she wasn't released at all. She's a restricted free agent, meaning the Fever fully intend to keep her and can match any offer she receives. Not only is she still part of their future plans, she's been praised by team executives as a cornerstone defender. That's not someone you cut in a panic. That's someone you protect. And then came the discovery that turned the fake purge into something much, much worse than sloppy reporting. It was outright fabrication. One of the so-called cut players didn't exist. The viral videos named Acadia Stokes as one of the casualties, but there is no Acadia Stokes. No record in the WNBA, no team history, nothing. The closest match? Kaya Stokes, a 32-year-old center for the Las Vegas Aces who has never, not once, played for the Indiana Fever. In other words, the creators didn't just get a name wrong, they invented a player to make their 8-person headline fit. That's not misinformation, that's narrative engineering. Think about what that means. These weren't isolated errors or misunderstood reports. They were deliberate attempts to craft a storyline, one that sounded dramatic enough to go viral, even if it meant bending reality to fit. The 8-player purge wasn't an event, it was a marketing tool, a catchy fiction designed to grab attention, and it worked. Millions of views, thousands of comments, endless debate, all based on something that never happened.
But when the purge narrative collapses, another question rises from the rubble. If the team didn't actually cut 8 players, what caused the chaos that everyone saw on the court? Because something clearly did happen. The lineups changed constantly. The chemistry looked broken. The rotations were never consistent. So if it wasn't a front office purge, what was it? The answer is darker, more human, and far more devastating than the clickbait version. What really tore the Fever apart wasn't management. It was misfortune. A storm of injuries so relentless it turned an entire season into survival mode. The purge wasn't real, but the pain absolutely was. And when you see the timeline of what the Fever endured, the truth becomes impossible to ignore. What really happened to the Indiana Fever wasn't some orchestrated roster purge. It was a full-blown catastrophe, the kind of season that no front office, no coach, and no player could have possibly prepared for. The 2025 campaign wasn't defined by bad management, it was defined by bad luck. An historic, almost unbelievable sequence of injuries that gutted the team from the inside out. By the end of the season, more than half of the Fever's core rotation had been sidelined. And it didn't happen gradually. It hit like a domino effect, one player falling after another until the entire foundation of the franchise cracked. It started, as all tragedies in Indiana do, with Caitlin Clark. Before 2025, Clark was the definition of durability. 4 years in college without missing a single game, a rookie WNBA season where she played all 41. She wasn't just the face of the Fever, she was the engine, the heartbeat, the gravitational center that held everything together. Then came the preseason quad injury, the first warning shot. It looked minor at first, the kind of thing she'd play through. But by May, it had become a nagging issue, a left quad sprain that forced her to sit for more than 2 weeks. She pushed through, returned to the court, and for a while, it looked like she might muscle her way through another full season. Then July hit. July 15th, the moment everything changed. A right groin sprain forced the Fever's biggest star to the sidelines again. At first, it was supposed to be precautionary, but every week the updates grew more uncertain, the language more careful. Then on September 4th, the news dropped like a hammer. Caitlin Clark ruled out for the remainder of the 2025 season. Just like that, the player who had been the league's main attraction missed 28 of 41 regular season games. The Fever's offense wasn't just hurt, it was gone. And Caitlin wasn't the only one. Far from it. Just when it seemed things couldn't get worse, the injuries came in waves. August 7th, against the Phoenix Mercury, Sydney Colson goes down with a torn ACL. Season over. Same game, Ari McDonald suffers a right foot fracture that ends her year. 10 days later, August 17th, Sophie Cunningham tears her MCL. Another season-ending blow. Chloe Beebe, gone too. One after another, the Fever lost 5 players to season-ending injuries in less than a month. That's not misfortune, that's a crisis. Every night became a scramble. The coaching staff wasn't drawing up game plans, they were patching holes, improvising just to keep a healthy lineup. By late August, practices looked like open tryouts. Players were signing on 7-day hardship contracts just to keep the team alive. What the internet mistook for cuts were actually emergency signings, desperate moves to replace bodies lost to injury. The Fever weren't rebuilding, they were surviving. This was the chaos that fans saw: the constant roster changes, the unfamiliar faces, the disjointed chemistry. It wasn't the result of panic or poor leadership. It was the unavoidable fallout of losing half a roster to injury. Every game became an act of endurance. Every possession a reminder that this team wasn't fighting its opponents anymore, it was fighting gravity itself. So while other channels were hyping up a made-up purge, the real story was unfolding in silence. The Fever weren't victims of a ruthless front office. They were victims of biology, of bad timing, of the cruelest season in franchise history. 5 season-ending injuries, 28 missed games from their superstar, 18 different players cycling through the roster. And somehow, through all of it, they still managed to compete. That's not a collapse, that's a miracle. But the story doesn't stop there, because while the injury storm tore apart the roster physically, it also exposed something deeper, a fracture that couldn't be seen on the stat sheet, a tension brewing inside the organization between philosophy and identity, between the coach's system and the superstar style. And that internal battle would soon become the Fever's biggest challenge of all. For Caitlin Clark, the 2025 season was supposed to be the coronation, the moment the most electric player in college basketball history cemented herself as the face of the WNBA. Instead, it became the year that broke her body and tested her spirit. Up to that point, Clark had built her reputation on 2 things: brilliance and durability. She was untouchable, the player who never sat out, who played through everything, who never seemed to tire. For 4 straight years at Iowa, she was the Iron Woman of college hoops. Then she hit the pros and carried that same energy through a grueling rookie season. Every game, every minute, every possession. Her body had never failed her, until now.
It started small, the kind of injury that barely makes a headline. A tight quad in the preseason, treated as a formality, a precautionary rest. But as the weeks passed, that tightness turned into something deeper, something that lingered. By late May, it was serious enough to sideline her for multiple games. Still, Clark returned, refusing to let the season slip away. She played through pain, taped up, pushed harder. Every possession, you could see it. The burst wasn't quite there. The explosion dulled. Yet, she kept going, because that's who she was, a competitor who'd rather limp onto the court than sit on the bench. Then came July 15th, the night that changed everything. Midway through a regular season game, Clark pulled up awkwardly, clutching her right leg. You could feel the air leave the arena. Fans went silent. The Fever's entire season flashed before their eyes. The next day, the team called it a right groin sprain. But as the days turned into weeks, optimism faded. On September 4th, the announcement finally came. Caitlin Clark was done for the year. 28 games missed. 2/3 of the season gone. The league's biggest star reduced to a courtside presence in street clothes. For the Fever, it wasn't just losing a player, it was losing their identity. Clark wasn't a piece of their offense, she was the offense. Every set, every rhythm, every burst of momentum started with her. Without her, the system sputtered, the spacing vanished, and the team lost its pulse. The Purge videos made it sound like a front office meltdown, but the truth was simpler. The Fever's collapse was a direct reflection of losing the one player who made them go. But there was something else happening beneath the surface, something more psychological. For the first time in her career, Caitlin had to watch instead of lead. Every game on the sideline was a reminder that no amount of toughness or work ethic could fix this. The quad, the groin, the endless rehab sessions, all of it stripped away the one thing she'd built her legend on: consistency. And when an athlete like Clark, who thrives on rhythm, repetition, and momentum, is forced to stop, it doesn't just break the body, it breaks the pattern. Still, even through injury, she never disappeared. She traveled with the team, sat through film sessions, and became the loudest voice on the bench.
You could see it in her eyes, frustration blended with determination. Because Clark isn't wired to accept defeat. She absorbs it. Every missed game became fuel, every setback another reason to come back stronger. And yet, her absence revealed something deeper about Indiana's structure, something that fans and analysts alike had overlooked. Without Clark, the Fever system didn't just weaken, it collapsed. That raised a new, uncomfortable question. Was the team built around Clark's talent, or was it built in spite of it? Her injury didn't just sideline her. It exposed a growing divide between how the front office envisioned her role and how the coaching staff was using her. And when she finally returns, that conflict won't stay hidden. Because Caitlin Clark doesn't just play basketball, she transforms it. And if the system can't evolve with her, it might just break under the weight of what's coming next. Here's where the whole 8-player Purge myth finally unravels, not just as a mistake, but as a textbook case of how a bad story becomes a viral one. What the internet saw as a mass firing wasn't some front office execution. It was the aftermath of desperation. When half your roster is injured and you're running out of healthy players to even practice, the league gives you a lifeline. Hardship contracts. Short-term, emergency deals that allow teams to sign replacements until their injured players recover. And that's exactly what the Fever did. Every transaction the viral videos pointed to, every supposed cut, every roster shakeup was actually a flurry of hardship signings and temporary releases. Players like Shea Petty, Ariel Powers, and Bree Hall weren't victims of a purge. They were stopgap heroes, brought in to keep the team from collapsing completely. One player would get hurt, another would get signed. Then, when someone returned, a hardship player would be released. It looked chaotic on paper, but it wasn't chaos, it was survival protocol. The problem is, to the untrained eye, or to someone chasing clicks, that cycle looked like destruction. Multiple transactions in a short time frame, unfamiliar names being added and removed, and a roster that changed week to week. To a casual observer, that looks like a team imploding. To a seasoned analyst, it looks like a front office trying to stay above water. But nuance doesn't trend. Team battles injuries doesn't get the same traction as Clark's team collapses overnight. So, the nuance was stripped away. What was left was a story too dramatic to resist. The Purge myth. And it wasn't just sloppy interpretation, it was narrative crafting. The creators behind those viral videos didn't misread one or two transactions. They built an entire storyline around a false premise. They cherry-picked names, ignored injury reports, and used coincidence as evidence. For example, when Sydney Colson and Ari McDonald both went down in the same game, hardship contracts had to be activated within days. That move alone created the illusion of mass roster turnover. But the truth? Nobody was fired. Nobody was purged. These were temporary, procedural adjustments, the kind every team makes in an injury crisis. Even worse, those same videos conveniently ignored the official statements explaining exactly what was happening. The Fever had been transparent about their hardship signings, injury designations, and roster management. But viral content doesn't thrive on clarity, it thrives on conflict. So creators cut context out of the frame and replaced it with speculation. The more dramatic it sounded, the more people watched. And before long, speculation had replaced fact.
That's the anatomy of a viral lie. It starts with a fragment of truth, in this case, real roster moves, and then it grows in the echo chamber, mutated by repetition until the truth is unrecognizable. And once it spreads far enough, nobody stops to check the receipts. Why bother when the story is already too good to question? But when you do check the receipts, everything lines up perfectly. The cuts were hardship releases. The mass overhaul was a paperwork necessity. The purge was an illusion, one that erased the human toll of what was actually happening. 5 players out for the season and a coaching staff scrambling to keep the season alive. So the Fever weren't tearing their roster apart, they were patching it together. The truth wasn't that the front office went rogue, is that the entire organization was forced into triage mode just to survive. And once you understand that, the Purge myth doesn't just look false, it looks cruel.
Because while the internet was accusing the team of imploding, the Fever were quietly enduring one of the most brutal seasons in league history. But here's where things take an even sharper turn. Because while the injury crisis explained the roster chaos, it also revealed something that no one was talking about, something brewing behind the scenes that could define the future of the franchise. The real story wasn't just about who was hurt, it was about who was heard. And at the center of that quiet storm stood Caitlin Clark and a coaching philosophy that might be pushing her to the edge. Beneath the surface of the injuries, the hardship contracts, and the viral chaos, there was a quieter battle brewing. One that had nothing to do with torn ligaments or transaction sheets. It was a philosophical war, the clash of vision and identity that cut straight to the core of the Indiana Fever. The front office saw the future one way, the coaching staff saw it another. And caught in the middle was Caitlin Clark, the most transformative player women's basketball has seen in decades. On paper, the Fever were built around her. The marketing, the ticket sales, the broadcast coverage, everything revolved around Clark's arrival. But internally, the team wasn't designed to play around her, and that's where the tension began. Caitlin Clark has always thrived in what's called a read and react offense, a system built on freedom, instinct, and creativity. It's basketball jazz. Players read the defense in real time, improvise, and create. That's where Clark is lethal. She's not just a shooter, she's a conductor, orchestrating chaos and beauty in equal measure. That's the game that made her a legend at Iowa. But the Fever system, under their current coaching philosophy, the opposite. Structured, scripted, heavy on set plays, screens, and predetermined motion, a style that limits improvisation, that tells players where to be and what to do before the ball even moves. To most teams, that structure offers stability. To Clark, it feels like a cage. In her own words, she once explained why she chose Indiana. The read and react offense was super important for myself. You're making basketball reads. It's not a set. You're not being told what to do every single time. That's the Caitlin Clark game. Freedom, vision, flow. Yet this season, even before the injuries, fans could feel the friction. Possession slowed. Clark, instead of orchestrating the offense, found herself drifting off ball, running through screens, waiting for touches that came too late. It wasn't just inefficiency, it was identity conflict. She wasn't being Caitlin Clark, she was playing a role someone else had written for her. And it showed. Her body language, her rhythm, even her trademark confidence, it all looked a step off. Behind closed doors, whispers began to circulate. The front office wanted to evolve the system to better fit Clark's instincts, while the coaching staff was reluctant to abandon its structure. The Fever were torn between two philosophies, the old school blueprint and the new age chaos Clark thrives in. And that internal standoff was starting to spill onto the court. From a distance, it looked like inconsistency. In reality, it was creative tension. The front office wanted to modernize. They saw what Clark could do when unleashed, the kind of offense that draws crowds and wins headlines. But for a coach whose entire career was built on structure, letting go meant losing control. And when a coach and a superstar see the game through different lenses, every play becomes a power struggle. The fans could feel it even if they couldn't name it. You'd see Clark wave off a set play to push the tempo. You'd see frustration on the bench when the offense slowed to a crawl. It wasn't disrespect, it was dissonance. Clark wasn't rebelling, she was reacting to a system that didn't speak her language, and the results spoke for themselves. When Clark had the freedom to dictate pace and read the floor, the Fever looked alive, fast, unpredictable, dangerous. When the system tightened, everything stalled. This is the real story that got buried under the Purge lie. The Fever aren't just rebuilding a roster, they're rebuilding an identity. The front office knows Clark isn't just a piece of the puzzle, she is the puzzle. Everything has to fit around her or nothing will work. But as long as the coach insists on playing chess while Clark plays jazz, this team will keep clashing with itself.
It's not open conflict yet, but make no mistake, it's simmering. The front office has made quiet moves hinting at change. They've been studying systems that mirror Clark's Iowa-style freedom, scouting players who can thrive in her rhythm. Meanwhile, the coach, reportedly, is doubling down on structure, convinced that discipline wins championships. Two visions, one franchise, and a superstar caught in the middle. That's the real story hiding in plain sight. Not an 8-player purge, but a slow, strategic struggle for control over the team's identity. It's not about who got cut. It's about who gets to decide what the Fever become. And as the off-season looms, that philosophical tug-of-war is about to collide with something even bigger: free agency, expansion, and the uncertain future of an entire league. Because the Fever's internal battle isn't happening in isolation. It's about to unfold on the biggest stage women's basketball has ever seen. The so-called purge that the internet couldn't stop talking about, it wasn't the destruction of a roster, it was just the opening act. The real destruction is coming now, because as the dust settles from the injuries and the truth finally replaces the clickbait, the Indiana Fever are staring straight into a storm unlike anything this franchise, or maybe even the league, has ever faced. The 2026 offseason isn't just another rebuild, it's a total reset. A crossroads where the future of the team and possibly Caitlin Clark's legacy will be decided. Let's start with the cold, hard numbers. Out of the entire 2025 roster, only 3 players remain under contract for 2026. Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston, and rookie sensation Michaela Timpson. That's it. Everyone else, 12 players in total, are free agents. Veterans like Kelsey Mitchell, the team's second leading scorer and locker room stabilizer, are unrestricted. Natasha Howard, Brianna Turner, Sydney Colson, Ariel Powers, all free agents. Lexi Hall, technically restricted but still unsigned. That's 12 players, 12 open questions, and 12 possible exits. This isn't a purge made by choice. It's a natural disaster written into the contract sheet. Now layer on the next 2 pieces of chaos: expansion and negotiation. 2 new franchises, Portland and Toronto, are officially joining the WNBA, which means an expansion draft is coming. Every existing team will have to expose players to be picked by the newcomers, and that includes the Fever. You can protect some of your roster, but not all of it. And when you've only got 3 players locked in and a dozen more floating in free agency, it's not just a draft, it's an open season. The Fever could lose key contributors before they even get a chance to negotiate. And as if that wasn't enough, there's one more storm brewing over everything. The CBA, the league's collective bargaining agreement, expires after the 2025 season. That means salaries, free agency rules, trade structures, everything could change. The foundation of how teams are built is about to be rewritten, while the Fever are already trying to rebuild from the rubble. The front office isn't just managing contracts, they're fighting a 3-front war: free agency, expansion, and the CBA. One wrong move, one mistimed deal, and Indiana could lose years of progress overnight. This is the real roster destruction, not the fake 8-player purge that went viral, but the structural uncertainty threatening to reshape the team's DNA. And here's where it gets even trickier. Every decision they make now revolves around one person: Caitlin Clark. How do you build a roster that matches her style? How do you keep Aaliyah Boston in sync with her pace and space rhythm? How do you recruit free agents when your system itself might change in the next few months? These aren't just basketball questions, they're philosophical ones. Because the Fever can't afford to keep pretending that Clark fits into any system. They need a system built around her. The front office reportedly knows this, and they want to give her the freedom she had at Iowa: fast breaks, spacing, constant read and react offense. But for that to happen, the coaching philosophy has to evolve, or the leadership has to change. The longer that internal power struggle drags on, the harder it becomes to recruit, to strategize, to plan. You can't rebuild around a vision when no one agrees on what the vision is. And that's the heart of this storm. It's not just about contracts and CBA clauses. It's about identity. The Fever are being forced to answer the hardest question in sports. Who are we now? Are they a disciplined, structured team that sticks to the coach's blueprint? Or are they ready to unleash a generational talent and build a new style of basketball around her instincts? Every roster decision,
Every free agent negotiation, every draft pick is about to test that answer. The coming months will decide more than who wears the Fever jersey next year. They'll decide whether this franchise can keep pace with the direction women's basketball is headed. Because the truth is, Caitlin Clark isn't just a player, she's a movement. She represents the shift towards fluid, fearless, instinct-driven basketball. And if the Fever can't adapt, they risk being left behind by the very star who put them back on the map. The real chaos isn't behind them, it's right in front of them. A perfect storm of contracts, egos, and evolution. The fake Purge story made fans look backwards. The real story forces them to look ahead. And as the 2026 season approaches, one thing is certain. Whatever version of the Indiana Fever emerges from this storm, it won't look anything like the team we saw before. It will either be the rebirth of a dynasty or the beginning of another implosion.
The 2025 Indiana Fever season wasn't a fall from grace. It was a trial by fire. A year that stripped away illusion, exposed the fractures beneath the surface, and forced the franchise to confront what it truly is. It wasn't the Caitlin Clark era that everyone expected. It was the survival era. A season defined by endurance, not dominance. By duct tape, not design. But here's the thing about survival. It changes you. It forges something harder, sharper, more self-aware. And now, standing at the edge of 2026, the Fever are staring at an opportunity that every broken team secretly dreams of. A clean slate. 18 players cycled through their roster last year. 18! That's not a team, that's a revolving door. They didn't just lose bodies, they lost rhythm, chemistry, and identity. Every game was a new lineup, a new rotation, a new version of themselves, just trying to make it through the week. But they didn't fold. Through injuries, through endless headlines, through fake narratives about purges and collapses, they fought. That matters. Because teams that survive chaos don't stay weak forever. They adapt. And that's exactly where the Fever are now, the transformation stage. The point where the rubble of survival starts to look like the foundation of rebirth. The front office knows it, the players feel it, and the league can sense it coming. This offseason isn't just another roster shuffle, it's a once-in-a-generation reset. The decisions made in the next few months will shape the next 5 years of Indiana basketball. Who they re-sign, who they let go, which philosophy they choose to follow, all of it will decide whether this team becomes a powerhouse or fades into another what could have been. At the center of it all, once again, is Caitlin Clark. But this time she's not just the rookie phenomenon. She's the voice that defines the direction. Her injury changed everything. It humbled her body, but sharpened her perspective. She's seen how fragile a season can be, how fast the narrative can twist. And she's not here to be anyone's poster girl anymore. She's here to win. That means demanding a system that works for her, teammates who complement her rhythm, and a front office willing to evolve with her. Because make no mistake, this next phase of the Fever isn't about rebuilding around Clark. It's about rebuilding through her. For Aaliyah Boston, the quiet powerhouse in the paint, this is her moment too. Boston's chemistry with Clark is still unfinished. Flashes of brilliance buried under the chaos of last season. But when the two are healthy and aligned, they represent one of the most lethal inside-out duos the WNBA has ever seen. Their connection could define the identity of the new Fever. Structure meeting instinct, discipline meeting improvisation. The future of this franchise depends on whether those two worlds can merge. And that's what makes the coming season so fascinating. The fake 8-player Purge narrative obsessed over destruction. But the truth, the real story, is about construction. The slow, deliberate process of turning chaos into cohesion. Of taking the lessons from 2025 and building something new. A roster that fits Clark's play style, a philosophy that lets her creativity breathe, and a front office that finally stops reacting and starts leading. But here's the catch. Rebirth doesn't happen quietly. It demands hard choices. Some beloved names won't return. Some systems will have to die for new ones to take their place. The Fever can't hold on to everything and expect transformation. Rebirth always comes with loss.
But if they make the right moves, if they lean into evolution instead of nostalgia, this could be the season that changes everything. Because underneath the fake headlines and the chaos, something real has been forming. Resilience. The Fever didn't implode. They endured. They didn't collapse. They adapted. And now, with the expansion draft looming, free agency unfolding, and the CBA reshaping the league's future, the Fever have something far more valuable than stability. They have clarity. They know who they are. They know what almost destroyed them. And now they know exactly what they need to become. The Purge was never real, but the transformation, that's happening right now. The injuries, the chaos, the misdirection, it all led to this moment. The moment the Fever stop surviving and start building something that can last. The moment Caitlin Clark's era truly begins. Because the real story of the Indiana Fever isn't about collapse, it's about evolution. About a team that was pushed to the brink, exposed by false narratives, and forced to find its truth. And that truth is simple. They're not the victims of a purge. They're the architects of a rebirth. The Fever's next chapter isn't written in rumors or headlines. It's written in resolve. And if they get this right, what comes next won't just rewrite their history. It'll redefine the entire league. The so-called Purge story was never about 8 players, and it was never about chaos in the front office. It was about distraction, a smokescreen that hid the real war unfolding behind closed doors. Because what's happening in Indiana right now isn't a collapse. It's a battle for the soul of a franchise, a tug of war between what the Fever have been and what they need to become, between structure and freedom, between a coach who believes in control and a star who thrives on instinct. Caitlin Clark didn't just bring star power to the WNBA. She brought a reckoning. She represents the future, a new generation of basketball built on improvisation, speed, and emotion. The front office knows that if they want to win in the modern WNBA, they have to let that version of the game take over. But for that to happen, the old blueprint, the one that keeps players locked in predictable sets and rigid schemes, has to die. That's not an easy fight. It's not loud. It's not public, but it's happening every day in meetings, in training camps, and in the quiet tension between what's safe and what's possible. This isn't about one bad season anymore. It's about identity. It's about deciding whether the Fever will continue to play the same old game or risk everything to evolve into something greater. Because make no mistake, evolution always costs something. It might cost comfort. It might cost leadership. It might even cost jobs, but that's the price of transformation. The fake Purge narrative tried to tell you the Fever's story was already over, that the team had fallen apart, that Clark's magic had faded, that the organization had lost its way. The truth is the exact opposite. The Fever aren't finished. They're just starting their most important chapter, the one where they stop being a story told about them and start writing their own. The war for the Fever's soul isn't happening in highlight reels or press conferences. It's happening in philosophy, in the gap between the old way and the new. And as the 2026 season looms, every decision will tip the scales. Every trade, every hire, every possession will answer the same question. Will Indiana choose control, or will they choose creation? So here's where you come in. You've seen the truth, stripped from the noise and the myths. Now it's your turn to weigh in. What's the bigger battle for the Fever right now? Rebuilding the roster or redefining who they are? Which side of this war should win? The system or the superstar? Drop your theory in the comments, because this story is far from over. We'll be tracking every move this offseason, from the expansion draft to the free agency signings to whatever shifts come from that CBA renegotiation. Because one thing is certain, this next chapter won't be about a fake purge. It'll be about a real transformation. The lie was chaos. The truth is evolution. And the war for the Fever's soul, it's only just begun.